One of the problems that you hear physicists discuss, or mention rather, it's nothing to discuss, they're completely ignorant, no information there, is the issue of how can there be something instead of nothing. It seems to me that they're applying concepts that have to do with the physical. Clear in the physical world, you have presence and absence. They're applying these to the metaphysical. Metaphysical is everything that has to do with the system as a whole, the system itself. And that is not really the right question. I mean, they're right that there is some kind of thing to be discovered there. If nothing else, a limit to the way that we absorb information, or a fundamental bottleneck in our ability to acquire information. But I wouldn't put it as why is there something rather than nothing, because that's really the smallest part of the problem. See, both there being something and there being nothing are absurd. They cannot be justified in terms of anything else. Imagine that there is nothing. I don't know where this nothing supposedly should exist, but there is no universe. You know, this fact about the absence of a physical universe is a fact. Now, facts are data, basically. A fact, even if the fact is an absence of some object, it's a data, it's a state of a system. When you talk about not there being a system, what's there to represent this bit of information? There is no physical universe. Where are you going to stick that? What memory cell, once you remove the computer altogether, what memory cell do you stick that in? It doesn't exist. So non-existence cannot be a fact, because there would be no substrate, no substance, no system to contain that information, that there is no universe. On the other hand, if you think about existence, it's kind of like the color red. Talk about the perceptual, subjective sensation of red. It cannot be justified, decomposed into anything else. Completely primal. And the fact that something exists, you know, existing is something we're familiar with, but if you just remove that familiarity for a second, just think about existing. Like, could you dream it up if you've never seen it before? Well, I just dreamed up of something. I'm going to call it existing. Really? What's that about? Well, if something exists, then, you know, you see shit and some things change and there's kind of like a time thing. People would think you're fucking crazy. Existence itself is this fucking crazy, undescribable thing. Just like if I ask you to describe red, in terms of what are you going to describe it? And so existence itself is absurd. It cannot be defined any more precisely as there is this dream. And you can talk about cellular automata or state machines. You can talk about causality. You can talk about dimensions. You can talk about all these things, but these are descriptions of the structure that exists. They're not descriptions of existence itself. You know, all people who like to think a lot eventually become puzzled and fascinated by the metaphysical. And that is because of either one of two causes. First one is they want your money and they want to fuck you hard. So they peddle some metaphysical bullshit to exploit your fucking gullibility and sell you some hand-clapping seminar. I don't have a seminar yet, but I'm working on it. But in the meanwhile, I probably belong to the second class, which is that I am used to having some kind of power over information, meaning that I can master it. I can take whatever patterns I see outside and stick them inside my head and break them down, analyze their constituent parts. And by doing that, I have taken a bit of the universe, put it inside myself, and that is how I grow. And so many things, including things that are microscopic, astronomical, things that happened billions of years before I was born, the far future. There's nearly nothing that is impossible to comprehend. Even very difficult problems, in the end, they weren't difficult, you were just ignorant. You weren't looking at them the right way. Once you understand something, everything is simple. There's not one person who understands something well who's going to tell you that's complicated. It's simple. It's complicated when you don't know it and you're trying to fuck around with it or learn it. But there is this sort of set of things, and they're very few. It's like God sticks you in the fucking garden. You gotta eat whatever you want, but don't eat the apple, and that's my fucking coconut, so don't you lay your hands on that shit. And that's another thing, I'm gonna call it pineapple. And you don't touch that. But aside from these three, you have a selection of 1 million different fruit that you can help yourself to. And this begs the question, why a few? It would be more reasonable if you thought, well, there's half of the things we can understand and half of the things we can't understand. That would just point to the fact that we have some limited ability to understand things. But the fact that you can understand millions of things, seemingly not only things that are connected with your evolutionary background or evolutionarily ancestral primitives, even things that have nothing to do with it, like, I don't know, material science or astronomy. The fact that you can understand all of that, but there's just like these 4 or 5 things that are uncrackable. They're not just that you get to a point and then you can't move on from there. It's just it doesn't even begin. You can't even begin to say something meaningful about yellow. It's just yellow. And so these things stand out like a giant billboard that says mysterious shit here. Now, Eliezer Yudkowsky, one of the most prominent singularity guys, who's now, I guess, president? Is he president of Machine Intelligence Research Institute? He's been waving his hands in the air for a very long time about the singularity. Very cool guy to read, by the way. Completely fucking insane. But one of the things that he said, I think it was in an essay called Staring into the Singularity, which I recommend, but he said, nothing mysterious has ever happened in the universe. You might think it's mysterious when you don't know it and when you're human. The universe itself does not have anything mysterious in it. Everything follows some kind of rule, whether it's chaotic or whether it's deterministic. But whatever it does, it's certainly not mysterious. Mysterious things, mystery is an emotion. It's not something that's out there. However, although that applies to almost everything, there are some things that seem intrinsically mysterious. Meaning the universe even doesn't know how the fuck it's doing it. It's not about some stupid uncertainty principle or something like that. It's about metaphysics. Now, when I said that sentence, the universe itself doesn't know how it's doing it, I'm saying actually something specific, which is the universe itself does not contain information about it. Because the system does not contain information about the space in which the universe is existing or about its own existence. It just contains information about how it is. See, this is a fundamental difference. You can analyze an object and suck out all of the information about how that object is. How does it behave? What are its relationships? The relationships uniquely define that object. But that's all you're ever going to get from it. There is no information contained within the object about something that is completely outside of its domain, outside the universe. So when I say the universe doesn't even know how it's doing yellow, I'm saying something specific. There is no information in the universe about that. Now, evidently, we think that we're contained within this universe, and that whatever we do is electrochemical activity, and there's information processing, and that's our latest and greatest technology. We don't know anything better than that. So we can't apply any different paradigm. Who knows what we're going to have in 30 years. Maybe we're going to be able to say, well, no, this is doing X, Y, Z. That's going to be the new lens through which we see things, and we will try to fit mental activity into that as well, as we've been doing it for a very long time, even back to the times of steam engines and hydraulic systems. So, evidently, as your mouth moves and you're making statements left and right, and some of these statements are statements about things which have no correspective in reality. That's very easy to do. Just talk about a flying pig, or actually I was sitting next to this lady in the airplane. So even flying pigs, let's not go there. I'm at the airport now, just waiting for my 3 hours layover. Cheap fucking ticket as usual. But evidently it's quite simple for you. And by the way, it seems like I'm alone in this airport. There's literally no one around. I got a huge floor here. I can walk around. Only one thing I can't do is eat anything. But other than that, I've got the stage all to myself. Anyway, we were saying it's quite easy for a human to open his fucking mouth and put words together in ways which do not describe reality, do not project reality along a particular angle in such a way that the pattern that you get out of the words is homomorphic to the way reality actually is or works. Very easy. So, is it really the same? When you're talking about yellow, is yellow the same thing as flying pig? Here comes the problem with taking seriously your awareness, and if you don't believe your awareness, everything else comes from that. So it's a very common observation. So you have to take your experiences primary. And now when you talk about existence and non-existence, is that the same as yellow? I think it's the same, but not the way you would expect, meaning that when you're talking about yellow, some guy can come up and say, yeah, but you're just imagining that, and feels like something to you because you got this thing in your mind. It's you're observing basically an unlabeled raw data stream, and because everything else is connected and labeled, the brain gets pretty puzzled with things that appear to just exist out of nowhere, such as colors, unlabeled, no connection, they're just there. Finds them intriguing. But see, if that's true for the mind, so if yellow is a datum to the mind, it didn't have to be there, it just happens to be there, then the state of existing and not existing are kind of like yellow for the universe. There are things that are not connected to anything that's taken place on the inside. You can't look at anything that's happening inside and say, okay, that therefore find a cause, I mean. So, you got a problem. And as I was saying, everybody who likes to think a lot eventually becomes fascinated by these things that are called the metaphysical. Because in the garden of infinite amounts of knowledge, patterns, and things you can learn, things you shouldn't expect to be able to learn, like what the fuck is the temperature in other galaxies. But that's no problem at all. And you got these 4 or 5 things that you think, how the fuck? Now the question is what kind of attitude to have towards these things, because it's very easy to say, oh well, that's just we'll never solve it, so let's not waste our time there. That's the way of seeing it. And there's also the reasoning that says, hey, gravity was like that too, until we gave up. See, as long as you don't give up, you got a problem. But the moment that you say, all right, well, fuck it, you don't have a problem. So with gravity, eventually, we just say, hey, fuck it. It's just there. Although, some new theories now that try to infer gravity from geometry. Talking about, what's the guy's name? Stole the moonstones, went to prison, and then came out with this theory. Fuck me if I remember what it is. The name. Don't often forget the name of a theory, but it's quite obscure. I mean, it's not a mainstream theory. Anyway, but despite that, generally people have just given up on gravity. We just say, hey, there's a body, so it's got gravity. And as Chalmers says, the science of consciousness will be a science of observation and mapping out connections. It will not be a science of inferring the existence of qualia from necessary premises. Better find where the fuck was my gate? Oh. I'm probably talking pretty randomly right now because I'm trying to find my way. But anyway, I was saying, so people gravitate towards these kinds of ideas because there are too few. That seems suspicious. It's not like half of the shit we don't understand. It just means we're stupid. But no, we got 4 or 5 things. Like why? What about existence? So I think the way that physicists ask this question, why is there something instead of nothing? I don't think if there was nothing instead of something, it would be just as puzzling. I think the real question is, how can there be a property that's called existence? Doesn't make any sense. Of course, I'm talking about it in terms of patterns that I've observed in the universe. And I'm saying, well, I've never observed this pattern of existing versus non-existing. I've observed presence versus absence, which is confusing because we sometimes call that existence or not existence. I can say, I don't know, a person who doesn't suck doesn't exist. That's a statement about absence, not about real existence. So, seem to be a few things which have absolutely no connection with the universe, such as a property of universes, which is called existing or non-existing. You see, there are some properties of an object or a system that are intrinsic to the system. And there are some other properties that must be contained outside the system. For example, whether I have a pink ball in my room, the idea of the pink ball does not contain the information, is it inside my room or not? That is a property, might be confusing, but it's a property of the room, meaning that if you want to look for whether the ball is there or not, you gotta go to the room. You don't open a book about pink balls. And that's interesting because that means that there's some properties that have to do with the objects, but they're not contained in the object, in the description of the object itself. Actually, I can make a clear example, which is that, for example, I can give you a complete description of a person and how their mind works and where all their parts are put together, how they're put together. And that description does not include the information, where is this person? So, is it possible that this idea of existence is a property of the universe that has to do with the universe, but it cannot be contained inside the universe? The universe is like the pink ball, and existence is like, is this ball in the room or not? And so when you consider things like yellow, like existence, you're staring into things that are outside of the universe. Imagine that. The only thing you would expect is for them to be absurd, incomprehensible, for us to have never come onto anything that could prepare you to make sense of it. So it's similar to saying, well, I'm a pink ball, and somehow I see that I'm contained in a room, but that doesn't make any sense, because my complete description of my experience is just, pink rubber. That's it. There's nothing that I can find within my universe of pink rubbery shit that has anything remotely to do with the idea of something located somewhere. So, I think that metaphysical questions are very aptly called metaphysical. They go beyond physics. By necessity, science has to do with figuring out the physical world. And almost everything is a physical world except metaphysical things. So it's a place where you can't do experiments. Are you going to do experiments on existence and non-existence? But eventually we need to draw a conclusion from this, or a lesson. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the beginning, but there are two types of knowledge or discoveries, both personal and scientific. The first kind makes you more effective, gives you some useful knowledge. The second kind has to do with making your world model better. And with a better world model, you're better able to decide what to go for, which is then the goal to which you put all the other knowledge. So it's very precious knowledge to have. So when you gain breadth of life and experience, to then figure out, these things are delusions. The important thing is something else that you weren't looking. Maybe you thought it was stupid and boring. Maybe you didn't even know it was possible. So, to go beyond any previously reached levels of not being easily entertained, I think that the observation, the most important observation that any human has ever made, is the discovery of the metaphysical. Because it hints, it's kind of like a tiny spiral away from this cage, and it's not a narrow cage, it's the whole fucking universe, but it's a cage. It's a universe of rules, it's a universe of physics, a universe of atoms. And just like the beginning of civilization, people figured out how to use boats and navigate across long distances, and we're like, holy shit, this thing that we call the world, meaning your tribe, my tribe, and those other guys across the mountain, that's nothing. We got a huge fucking territory. We don't even know where it begins, where it ends. So what is the final frontier? As humanity is slowly getting ready to establish fast food joints on the moon, Mars, and space, I'm already a step beyond, because that's how I fucking roll. And I'm telling you, the universe is a limitation. Can you imagine accessing places where things don't work according to, well, cause and effect? So, monkey make a trick, monkey get a treat. I'm gonna put the silicone wafer under the little thing there, and then we're gonna connect it, and then we got an electronic device. It's a big fucking deal, right? Or, yeah, I'm gonna take a superconducting, super fucking collider, I'm gonna spin it all, achieve a gravitomagnetic effect. Now we can travel, we can make an inertial bubble, we can achieve warp 10. Big fucking deal. You're still within the physical universe. If you're gonna be a painter, what would you rather paint with? Rather paint in black and white or in colors? The colors are undescribable. Whatever is going on there with colors might give us a hint. It's kind of like a nexus, a junction between our physical world and whatever's outside this universe. The experience of color is the part of us that is metaphysical. It is the odd juncture point between the stuff that we can access and the things that are, by definition, inaccessible because we're sandboxed. But apparently the sandbox is not perfect. And so I think by studying the science of consciousness the way that Chalmers intends it, that is a science of correspondence, what kind of shit going on in the universe does something else that has nothing to do with the physical. You know, if you have a CPU and then you run some computations in the CPU, there are effects within the simulation that it's, for example, if it's instantiating a simulation, right? So the numbers are getting crunched. So that's all fine. But outside of the system, it's creating some magnetic fields. And these magnetic fields are going on not inside the program, not inside the simulation, but they're going on in a physical universe which is completely detached or almost detached from the simulation. So imagine the simulation as being imperfectly but nearly perfectly sandboxed from the actual universe. So the simulation, all it knows is zeros and ones, but outside there's this weird shit. Magnetism and three-dimensional space. It's got nothing to do with zeros and one. It's not bits, it's actual space. And if you were on the inside and all you had to think with was zeros and ones, then the idea of actual physical space would be incomprehensible. And the idea of magnetism also would be incomprehensible. Never seen anything like it. Can't explain it or break it down in terms of anything else that you ever seen. But here's the catch. Suppose that this magnetic field creates some kind of effect within the simulation. So let's say that, for example, you find a way that if you can take large areas of memory and flip them all very fast from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1. So you maximize the magnetic field. You don't even know this is happening. You don't know. You just observe the effect. Or initially, you see a glitch, inexplicable glitch. You flip all these pages of RAM And all of a sudden, you see some kind of patterns, strange patterns of bits getting flipped that you weren't expecting. And you say, well, how can that be happening? Action at a distance, or that's, the analogy breaks down here, because the way I've put it, which is quite plausible actually, so you create strong magnetic fields depending on what kind of computing device you're using. Might well create a magnetic field that's intense enough to flip bits in some other area of memory. What we're dealing with consciousness is different, because the result that we see is not just bits getting flipped, it's not just more of the same. We're actually getting a real whiff of the outside. And that's fine. Don't expect analogies to be perfect, especially if one hasn't slept for 18 hours, catching a cold, and has another 3 hours of layover. But so I think that what we're onto here with consciousness and with this dilemma of existence versus non-existence, I talk about metaphysical pointers before. The idea of the universe existing or not existing, the subjective sensation of color, these are nearly identical things. They're in the same category. There's also the metaphysical pointers, here, now, me, I. Physical world does not have any description whatsoever about which one is me. Is nowhere to be found. That bit is nowhere to be found. And so it must exist somewhere else. So it seems like we exist halfway through between a physical universe, which we can do science on, and some other realm that we got no fucking idea about. No fucking idea. But somehow, just like I told you, the example was to flip large areas of RAM from 0 to 1 very fast, create some electromagnetic effect to observe some glitch. I think the brain is doing that by self-reflection, some internal trick, could be integration of information. In the end, it's playing with causality. If you think about the real substrate of the universe is causality. There are actual theories now going on about everything is just cause and effect. And there's no matter, there's no energy, it's just cause and effect. But essentially, the mind is like a big amplifier of cause and effect. And whatever's going on inside it, just the most concentrated cause and effect machine. So the equivalent of flipping pages of RAM is, I can only define this quite fuzzily, but this idea of amplifying the effects of stimuli, and this trickling up of complexity across layers of abstraction. This is the trick, this is the glitch. Could have to do with self-reflection, that is something whereby a loop is established. The output becomes the input, feedback loop. That could be what is exploiting this glitch, where you have this imperfect sandboxing, and where things that you do in the physical universe have effects outside of it. So if you think about the marvel of what could be outside of it, dwarfs anything else that you can imagine, because outside of the universe, we then have stuff like existing or not existing. And so maybe Yudkowsky was right. Nothing mysterious ever happened in the universe, because it was happening outside of it. The outside of the universe is the place where you have colors, place where you have metaphysical pointers such as me, here, now. So, what other things are there? Each one of these things, if you could discover them, does more to enlarge your awareness than any mere experiences that is permutations of stuff that's already widely available. Just like the ability to see color would be if you've never seen it. Or just like taking a look at the phenomenon of existence would be if you never looked at it. So we can only assume that if this is really a glitch, if this is some partial overlap that was stumbled upon casually by evolution in trying to achieve something that's unrelated. All evolution ever wanted to do was flip RAM areas. All it ever wanted to do was turn zeros into ones and back to zeros really fast. That's all it wanted to do. And then this started to flip bits and create a mirror image resonant pattern, and that seemed to be useful, so they got amplified. But there's no reason to suppose that the stuff that was discovered by chance is all there is to it. In fact, if we're talking about something that is outside the universe, we should only expect it. I mean, every time we've discovered an outside, it has always dwarfed what we were familiar with on the inside. From the time we've seen that the world is not a square mile, but it's like people living beyond the mountains, across the river, to the first times when you look at the sky with a telescope and figure out, holy shit, it's huge. And so, if any of this has any reality to it, you could expect metaphysical pointers such as I, me, here, now, colors, existence, and non-existence to be your surroundings in a space that would be astronomical if compared to the size of the universe. So, that's why I'm saying these things, these reasonings, these experiences are an example of the type of discovery that does not make you better able to do things. It doesn't add to your effectiveness, but it gives you more breadth, more possibilities. And it helps you to better decide what to go for. Because if you think, well, these universes are parallel, but they're partially overlapping, as I've explained. We should really get onto it, figure out, is that the full extent of the overlap? Is it possible that some people have more overlap? After all, people vary in all attributes. And since me, now, here, yellow, these are all things that the mind is producing, it would seem that the more developed the mind, but not necessarily, it could be just a peculiarity of how the mind is working, not related to intelligence or anything, but it could be that there are some people that have larger pieces of themselves existing outside of physical reality. So, I rambled on about the metaphysical, didn't go very far. No one before me has, to my defense. So, Jung was fascinated by synchronicity and by these sort of archetype effects. But I don't know of a single test where things of this sort were ever demonstrated. But I think color is real. You don't see color. No one can explain that in physical terms. And this could all be far, far simpler too. By all the possibilities that I've described not existing outside of the universe, but orthogonal to it. And it would be like this. So suppose you're writing a computer program, and the computer program is simulating the weather. Ray Kurzweil famously, probably only to me, famously said, if you simulate a rainstorm, nobody really gets wet. But it's not true. The people inside the simulation are actually wet. Now, the simulation does not need to necessarily encode things that are plausible to some well-meaning observer and arbiter. It could be absolutely anything. Simulate a place where people get and find a nonsensical sound. What if you simulate a snap storm? In a simulation of a snap storm, are people actually getting snapped? That's actually a word. I hope you get the point. If not, this might be the wrong video for you. But the point is, you could simulate something that doesn't even make sense, that kind of works like wet, that if it happens to you, then you stay, whatever. And then you're beep, I don't know the word. How about how about a time storm where if it happens in the simulation, everybody in the simulation is actually getting timed. I'm getting timed on. It doesn't make any sense, but if you can write a simulation in which it makes any sense at all, at that point is real. So this is just an alternative way of not having to postulate some kind of larger context, some larger metaphysical context in which the universe exists. And really it's a fake difference. It really doesn't matter one way or the other. Just different words. But so the issue is that this could be the two-dimensional universe. I'm using dimension loosely here. On one dimension you have a causality, and on the other dimension, this causality is the fabric on which everything metaphysical is constructed. Which means that the metaphysical is absolutely within reach. All you have to do is define it well enough to simulate it. Make a simulation of the metaphysical. After all, that's what my brain is doing. Or I wouldn't be able to talk about it. So, I think that knowing these things, whichever one of the second is really not controversial, I think. But there still need to be some rules. What the fuck is my gate? I'm lost. All numbers except my real gate. Oh, this way. So, is the brain deciding what yellow is? I think it is. I think the parameters of how yellow feels like are embedded within the mind and embryogenesis and neurogenesis, decided by evolution or randomly occurring because of how you paired it up with other things of the same color. But it doesn't matter because there are still rules, okay? Who decides that such and such type of information processing looks yellow and something looks red? So in the end we go back to the first theory, which is there has to be something outside which is not physical. And I've described it much more precisely. See, the set of rules that determines what kind of cause and effect, gives and takes, create what kind of ontological realities. Those rules have to exist somewhere. And those rules are not going to exist in the laws of causation, because that's just the physicality of things bumping around. There has to be a different set of laws, says, like a meta laws, like metadata. Say, when such and such type of processing occurs, you get yellow. And we go back to the beginning because these rules cannot exist within the physical universe. They have to exist somewhere else. Now, I'm not saying that they're a really different universe. I mean, it's arbitrary how you define the boundaries of what you call universe. You could just say the whole thing is universe, and then there's a physical universe, which is what we traditionally think of when we talk about universe. That's fine as well. It doesn't change my point. In the end, my point is simply this. We need to get to the point where we can fuck around with this, and it's going to come pretty fast. I think within 10, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, we're going to have some way of fucking around with the brain. Maybe primitive, but still, there's going to be some effects on our perception, and we can explore what those do. It's going to be really interesting. It might be the beginning, just like with every revolution, people didn't even think something like that was possible. Now, before we got electronics, nobody knew all this could be possible. Before the internet, before the Industrial Revolution, before agriculture. Revolutions are called revolutions because they turn things around. People can't imagine them before. Inconceivable. So, could it be that we're just on the verge of figuring out the biggest game in town? No, it's not. It's not even evolution. Sorry, Dawkins. A real big game is ontology. And, if anything could be ascribed to godly powers, certainly it's not fire, but it is this, the ability to create perception, the ability to be a craftsman of ontologies, to create stuff of the same kind, stuff that goes into the same bin or category as existing versus non-existing. And that's what I want to be when I grow up.